Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I do apologize that we are starting a bit late, but that's because, as you can see, two panels have been merged in one place now. It gives us great pleasure to welcome all of you. And we'd like to start with the panel on cyber diplomacy, a new global cyber order. We are indeed grateful to our distinguished Minister of State for External Affairs, Mr. M.G. Akbar, for gracing the occasion and delivering the keynote address, which will start off our panel discussion. As most of you know, Minister Akbar is a very distinguished public figure in India. He is one of India's best-known journalists. And much more recently, ever since he became Minister of State for External Affairs, he has been directly overseeing the conduct of India's multilateral diplomacy. So with these few words, I'd like to invite Minister Akbar to give his keynote address. Minister, your floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, very distinguished gathering on the dais, equally distinguished audience, welcome to our conference. The theme we have for this panel, as you can see, a new global cyber order. And if you actually spend a little time thinking about the subject, almost every word might be contentious. But the search for order remains a prime objective of diplomacy. A search for definitions remains an important part of that mission. And if you think that the task is easy, I would only suggest that you look at one fact. From 1996, the United Nations has been trying to get a definition of terrorism. We still haven't got anywhere. These efforts are not easy in the best of circumstances. And when you come to an area like cyber, the task becomes almost a virtual impossibility, if you would like to use a relevant phrase. Why? Because the pace of change is so tremendous that before you have thought about the answer, the question has changed. Even in the last 35 years, the manner in which cyber itself has its options, its capabilities has been so volatile that far beyond looking for a space, for order, we don't know how to deal with the day-to-day realities and disorders that emerge. I want to begin by giving you an example from what would be the great inventions of human history. And you look at the pace of change and the pace of impact it had upon human behavior. Let's begin with the wheel. Whoever started it at whatever time it started it, it took up to the 20th century for the wheel to shift from an ox cart or a bullock cart or a horse cart into an automobile. So the pace of change was extremely slow. If you think of paper as one of the great inventions, not only did paper take many centuries to reach its present impact, but paper did not really go below the use and of the elite. It was never really, and why do I say that? Because you had paper, but we never managed universal literacy. That too is a recent phenomenon. Take printing and communication, and you will find equally, of course, printing's impact was faster, but nothing is compared to the kind of pace we have. I think of electricity as one of the great inventions, and there are still parts of this world which are dark. We have not taken change to the levels, but when we come to the net and we have come to cyber, in 3 decades, we have reached levels that are absolutely phenomenal in their impact. Absolutely phenomenal in their impact, both in pace and in depth. I'm going to only give you an example from our experience in India. And I challenge anyone to say that 20 years ago or 15 years ago, we might even have considered what is happening today to be in the realm of the possible. It would not. Today, we, under the present government, have made technology and cyber technology and placed it at the heart of economic transformation of the country. We are using it to challenge our biggest problem, which was the elimination of poverty. Today, without cyber, without the net, without the space and the options created through it, we could not have had the fundamental change in banking. What was the problem with banking? Banking was created as an exercise essentially for those with money. The poor were always excluded from banking. Today, within the space of 3 months, 2 years ago, 300 new accounts were possibly opened. It could not have happened without, of course, the will of the people behind it, but also without technology. And from that emerged, I urge you to think that one of the greatest changes that is taking place today is happening through technology in an area which we don't really connect with the two. What? Gender emancipation. Today, gender emancipation is taking place at unprecedented levels in our country because of technology. What do I mean by that? After the banking system, this was followed by the Mudra scheme. The Mudra scheme, for those who are not totally familiar with it, is basically giving relevant level or low level loans without collateral to those who need it most, at the vegetable sellers, the people who can work from home, the cottage industries, and so on. It's not simply the fact that upwards of 12 billion, equivalent of $12 billion has been disbursed to nearly 100 million people, or between 90 and 100 million people. But the most important fact about that is that 78% of these loans have gone to women, creating really economic empowerment of women at a phenomenal level. Phenomenal level. Technology has brought, again, a second problem that we had, almost institutional problem, was the problem of transparency, which is really a polite way of saying that money was being siphoned off. And because of technology, according to any estimate, in the last year, we have saved something to the equivalent of 55 to 60,000 crores, which was money being siphoned off. So, technology has enabled us to do what the Prime Minister identified, is turn change into a mass movement. Turn economic transformation into a mass movement, into a people's movement, and that is precisely what we have managed to do. I just want to give you 2 or 3, because we don't have time, and I certainly don't want to be guilty of excess. But, a few statistics to show how the Aadhaar, today all credit cards, debit cards, ATM add up to around 32 million transactions a day. Today, Aadhaar alone is doing 61 million. Aadhaar alone. And this is the new system that we've created as ID empowerment for the people. But when we come back to diplomacy, what we are really engaged in this subject is what I would like to call frontier diplomacy. We are crossing and moving into frontier without knowing precisely what we are entering. And we are having to deal with new challenges, even as we have perhaps not even finished meeting the old challenge. the most significant element of our progress in the 21st century is, in my view, if the century is going to be a century of shared prosperity and of shared peace, at least for the search for it, then the realization is soon coming to everyone in the business that, the human being has been a land animal all through history. Our culture is land-based, our economy is land-based, and so on and so forth. Our habitat is land-based. But land is now becoming an exhaustible commodity. Land is losing its ability to deliver to the aspirational level. And the 21st century, we will have to move towards the seas, below the surface, not simply the surface, towards the seas, the skies, and to space. The problem with all three, the seas, the skies, and space, is that they do not have boundaries. And to look and search for a rules-based regime where we have defined boundaries has been difficult enough. How do we meet the challenge of finding regulations and rules and a global order where there are no boundaries? And we literally have to find an order which reflects a value system where everyone treats the humankind as a collective body and works for the common good. It may be this requires more nobility than we have, but I leave the answers to others. Thank you very much.
I thank the Honorable Minister for his keynote address. And we begin with our panelists. Each panelist, as I've informed them earlier, has 8 minutes because of the shortage of time, and our intention to have an interactive session after they finish their presentations. I now come to our first panelist, the Honorable Dr. Istvan Mikola, State Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary. Dr. Mikola is a very active politician who has been Deputy Prime Minister of Hungary. He played a significant role in the evolution of Hungary's leading role on cyber issues. He has been Ambassador of Hungary to the OECD, and we look forward to his views on the role of technology in implementing sustainable development goals. You have the floor, Minister.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure and honor to have the opportunity to be part of this very important gathering of various stakeholders aiming to further the cause of international cooperation in the field of cyberspace. First of all, I would like to thank our Indian host for organizing the global conference on cyberspace and for inviting me to present Hungary's position. The internet and cyberspace have changed our daily lives enormously. Technology allows us to do things we might have not even dreamed about 20 or even 10 years ago. The growing importance of information and communication technologies for political, economic, social, and military activity is one of the most significant strands of the current security environment. All countries rely on these technologies to drive economic and social growth and to enable their most critical infrastructure systems. But the opportunities provided by ICTs also create vulnerability and complexity in international relations, which can lead to doubt, speculation, and tensions. These are challenges that all states face. Attacks in cyberspace are not issues anymore for technical or IT people to deal with cybercrime. Attacks get the attention of the highest political leadership. Rarely a day goes by without news about events involving cyber topics. We all have already heard it thousands of times, but I need to repeat this: cyber issues do not know borders. Therefore, cooperation between states is crucial. To exchange information and best practices about issues related to cyberspace and the threats resulting from it is a good start to enhance cooperation and create trust between countries facing the same challenges. The title of our panel is A New Global Order. The question is, do we have a new global order or do we need one? Certainly, cyberspace creates new challenges and requires adapting our ways of handling our affairs, be it internally or in the international context. However, we do not and shouldn't have to start everything from scratch. It is a long-held view of Hungary that existing international laws, as well as the UN Charter, in its entirety apply in cyberspace. Having said that, the work of the United Nations group of governmental experts was crucial to advance understanding of the application of international law, norms, rules, and principles of responsible behavior of states. Over the years, the group has reached consensus on a number of views, contributing to greater cyber stability, and we regret that this year it was not able to reach such a consensus. I urge the continuation of the discussions as well as the implementation of consensual views stated in previous UNGG reports. From the aspects of governance, I would urge that we do not have or need a new global order in cyberspace, but need to apply the existing rules of the physical space, fitting the requirements of the digital age. Nevertheless, when we look at innovation, economic advantages and opportunities cyberspace can offer, I think we all agree that we can speak about a new global order. The Internet fills up our everyday lives. We are able to access enormous volumes of information in just a few seconds. Knowledge can be shared and news are spreading in real time all over the world. We have mobile phones, which are small computers. We have connected and self-driving cars, smart cities, and smart households, just to name a few revolutionary achievements. These are all opportunities in economy can benefit of immensely, but at the same time they may spread the digital divide even wider, and they certainly carry security risks as well. Developing countries must be able to make use of the same cyberspace-enabled opportunities and benefits as developed countries enjoy and be equal partners in this new global order. Hungary is convinced that building a development-oriented information society is one of the key ingredients to maintaining peace and enhancing worldwide prosperity. As a result of the first meetings of the World Summit on Information Society, ICT has been identified as a tool to contribute to the achievements of the Millennium Development Goals. 2015 was an important year regarding sustainable development and digital inclusion. Within the framework of the UN, agreement was reached on the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, including the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and on the continuation of the activities of the World Summit on Information Society for another 10 years. Although the 2030 Agenda doesn't explicitly name ICT as a tool in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, the outcome document on the World Summit on Information Society clearly states that ICTs can accelerate the progress across all SDGs. Access to information and communication technologies has also become a development indicator and aspiration in and of itself. Building confidence and security in the use of information and communication technologies for sustainable development is named as a priority. Many developing countries lack affordable access to ICTs, so special focus must be put on actions that improve the enabling environment for ICTs and expand related education and capacity building opportunities. Whatever the level of the smart technologies, robots, artificial intelligence systems is, without skilled and well-educated personnel who control and use these smart systems, we will not be able to enjoy any beneficial economic impact. Hungary welcomes the integration of big data and innovative solutions into the international development cooperation. With these new approaches and solutions, development cooperation could be more sustainable, predictable, and productive. We support the efforts that ensure that development activities, as well as dealing with development challenges, would be enhanced by the use of digital technologies, and we welcome the mobilization of private resources for this area of significant transformation potential for sustainable development as well. Hungary pays special attention to enhance the role of digital solutions both in the Hungarian public and private sectors and at the international level too, with its Digital Success Programme. We are ready to share our good practices with developing countries related to this innovative program and its experiences. The Convention on Cybercrime is named after my capital, Budapest, as it was signed 16 years ago in Hungary. The Budapest Convention is so far the only legally binding international agreement in the field of cyberspace. Although the Convention was formulated under the aegis of the Council of Europe, it is open for signature to third countries. To date, the treaty was already being ratified by 56 states, including, just to name a few, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Senegal, Sri Lanka, the United States of America, Israel, and Japan, along with most of the members of the Council of Europe. The document provides a good basis for countries not yet having cyber legislation to develop their national frameworks, and several programs exist with the aim of assisting states in this endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, the global challenges of cyberspace must be addressed through global cooperation. Everything is connected and interdependent in cyberspace. The weakest link determines the overall security and stability of the whole. It is common responsibility of all stakeholders to meet the security challenges, and that requires collective and proactive efforts. I have been present at the Global Conference on Cyberspace in The Hague in 2015, when the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, or shortly GFC, was launched. Hungary is a founding member of the GFC, and we have been actively participating in the activities of the forum. It is remarkable how much was achieved by GFC members in the past 2 years in capacity building efforts. I am proud that Hungary, as coordinator of the GFC initiative on coordinated vulnerable disclosure, actively contributed to this multinational effort. Today, the work of the past 2 years represented the GFC Global Good Practice on Coordinated Vulnerability Disclosure. I am glad to hear that the GFC will continue in ambitious work based on the global agenda on cyber capacity building launched today. I would like to use this opportunity to confirm that Hungary will continue its engagement in the GFC, an excellent platform to share information, experiences, and best practices to every country, not just developing ones, because it is the right forum for an open and equal dialogue among peers. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mikola, especially for focusing on both capacity building and the use of technology for sustainable development. I would like to invite our next speaker, the Honorable Sophie Lohde, Minister of Public Sector Innovation of Denmark. She oversees a political project that focuses on renewing and digitizing the public sector services in Denmark to make them more coherent. As you know, Denmark is a global leader in the application of cyber technology for the welfare of its citizens, and it is a great pleasure to invite the Minister to share her views, especially on the role of the newly created position of Tech Ambassador in Denmark. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Your Excellencies, fellow colleagues, thank you for inviting me to speak at this important event. Denmark is a small country, but large in cyberspace. And some of you might say that we are mostly known for fairy tales and windmills, but I'm standing here today because we are also one of the digital frontrunners in the world. So while we might be easy to overlook compared to a giant like India, in a number of areas, the world is looking at how we have organized our society and our public sector. Today, I would like to talk to you about the digital development we have been through and how these developments give us both new opportunities as well as they pose new challenges. So what makes Denmark so digital? We are a country of early adopters of technology. 94% of our households have access to the internet, and 88% of our population use public digital solutions. In Denmark, it is mandatory by law for citizens and businesses to use a selected number of public services online. We ask our citizens and businesses to use the digital delivery channel for a range of public online services. And in return, we have promised our citizens to deliver world-class public service. In 2012, we set a goal. It was one of the boldest political decisions taken in recent years. we decided to abolish the use of physical letters and stamps in our communication with citizens and businesses. The goal was to have at least 80% of written communication between citizens and the public sector made completely digital. This was not an easy task, and at first the goal seemed out of reach. But I'm proud to say that we have achieved our goal back in December 2015. The decision meant that letters from, for example, hospitals or public administration were sent to your personal digital letterbox or digital post provided by the government. Not only do we avoid large amount of papers at our desk at home, we can see that digital post has resulted in significant cost savings in the public sector on the level of 136 million euros per year. That is really the magnificent thing about our digital solutions. They provide a better service for citizens and businesses at a lower cost. And you may ask, what about senior citizens and the vulnerable part of our population? They are surprisingly happy about the digital transition. And those who really need to be helped are, of course, helped. So while critics call this approach for forced digitization, I call it common sense. But the way the citizens communicate with the public sector is not only the only place where we are first movers. Another significant step the government has taken is naming the world's first tech ambassador. The office of the tech ambassador has a global mandate and a physical presence across 3 time zones at Silicon Valley, Copenhagen, and Beijing. In effect, we are disrupting the traditional concept of diplomatic representation. Techplomacy, as we call it, is an acknowledgement of the key role that technology and digitization plays in the future, for individuals and societies alike. It is also a recognition of the political and global influence that the tech industry has in the 21st century. Technology will contribute to solving some of the largest global challenges and bring about a positive transformation with huge potential for people around the world. Yet rapid developments in areas such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, and cybersecurity also create new challenges and vulnerabilities. We won't have all the answers for all these challenges ready up front, but it is clear that we need a stronger international discussion on how we want these new technologies shape our societies in the future. That is why we have established a new diplomatic platform for dialogue and collaboration on a broad range of topics with the tech industry. The tech ambassador will work to build strategic international partnerships and engage directly with stakeholders both from the private and public sector. We need to adapt and engage with new technologies and their impacts on society, economy, labor market, infrastructure, and society. Digitization knows no borders. It is, by definition, international. That is why we have decided to test new digital waters in our approach to foreign policy and diplomacy. The tech ambassador also has an important job in making sure we engage with and learn from the tech companies. The world's most successful enterprises today build their businesses on data, and so will the world's most successful nations. We here in this conference room are tasked with building successful nations by using data in the right way. We have to use data and insights they provide us to make better political decisions, and we have to use data to make our decisions transparent onto the public. Data can provide quality services to our citizens and businesses, even across borders. And finally, we need to make data accessible as a resource for our businesses, we want to use data to enable economic growth. Data will be the most important raw materials in the future. But as we become more and more dependent on data, it is crucial that we also talk about how to safeguard them. Cyberspace has not only become the next frontier for our society, but it has also become the new battleground of nations. This summer, several organizations, both public and private, in different countries all over the world were hit by ransomware attacks. It was clear that the attacks are no longer limited to one country or one company. Attacks are global and spread with lightning speeds. In the case of the WannaCry attack, 230,000 computers in more than 150 countries were infected within the first day. Because our society is digital, attacks like these has a high probability of paralyzing our everyday life. They can hit our central infrastructure such as energy companies, power grids, bus stations, gas stations, the airports, and banks. In Denmark, the NotPetya attack hit one of our largest corporations in Denmark, Maersk, which was paralyzed for several days. This new reality leaves us as a nation and as the international society with an awesome task. We have to work extremely hard to maintain the trust of our citizens. We must make sure that the digital services we provide to continue to be safe and reliable. One of our greatest common challenges will be to protect our countries against global cyber attack. This is too important an issue for each of us to focus on our own countries alone. We must strengthen our defense both nationally and in collaboration across nations. This summer, attacks have taught us that a weakness in one country can quickly spread to other countries. Reports from the UN indicate that only about half of all countries in the world have a cybersecurity strategy or on the process of developing one. We need to do better for our citizens, our businesses, and our neighboring countries. Only by maintaining a high level of security, we are able to keep our citizens' trust in the digital development of our societies. This was a brief story about our successes and our challenges. The developments that Denmark has been through over a number of years has fundamentally changed the way the government work and public service is delivered. Denmark might be small, but we want to share our experiences for others to learn from. We want to help and raise the level of ambition for all of us and make sure we create a future that is both digital and safe, a future that benefits people all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your sharing your experiences and your perspectives. And I'm sure Denmark will continue to play a very active role as we develop a common perspective on how to deal with issues in cyberspace. Our next speaker, I'm happy to welcome Ambassador Hyun Vice Minister in the South Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's no stranger to India, having been Ambassador of South Korea to India till very recently. He has also been Ambassador of South Korea to the international organizations in Vienna. Ambassador Cho.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's very good to be back in Delhi. I recognize many familiar faces here and there. At the outset, let me congratulate the Indian government for hosting this meaningful conference. I hope it will contribute to the global cybersecurity, but also it will accelerate the pace of achieving your goal of digital India. As Prime Minister Narendra Modi said yesterday in his opening speech yesterday. Well, when I am sitting down in front of my computer, I'm sometimes I'm confused whether I'm living in a cyber world or in a real world. As for the real world, we know that technological development has brought about prosperity. We cannot say technological development alone has brought about peace as well. To maintain peace and build peace, it has been diplomacy always after the war. So today, let me speak about diplomacy's role in building a peaceful and prosperous cyber world. Let's use the analogy of the real world, how we have come here. Again, in building cyber world, technological development is very important. In case of Korea, we have learned that development of ICT, nowadays IoT, these are all important factors in achieving economic and social benefits. Just like the real world, however, we have threats, dangers, attacks, and bandits in the cyber world as well. We often hear many cases of hacking, illegal transfer of money. I don't want to name those who are doing this, but sometimes even disruption of the whole system of a country. So, what is to be done? How to avoid this kind of disruption and how to protect our cyber world, just like we have built a secured real world. We should get inspirations from the real world and its history. The first thing that comes to mind is cooperation among different players and many countries. Sharing information is the first step towards the end. To do that, we need to have many bilateral talks, and in doing so, we can build confidence. Just like the real world, we can have confidence-building measures. Secondly, we need to put our resources on capacity building, because there are some areas, countries where the cyber world is yet to be further developed. A highly developed cyber country can offer some assistance for building capacity, because we know that in this closely intertwined, interconnected cyber world, if there is a weak spot, then hackers will come through this weak spot and eventually attack us. So capacity building is an important factor in securing this secured cyber world. The third point is about cooperation, because the governments alone cannot achieve all the goals we have. We have to cooperate with experts, corporations, NGOs, and so on. That's the reason why the Korean government put forward the idea of multi-stakeholder model. When Korea hosted the third conference on cyber security, we offered the idea of GCCS, and we have been working to make the cyber world secured and also sustainable. In this context, I think it's time for us to think about the future of this conference. Are we going to have this conference on and on, or are we going to make some harvest and put these harvest products to a certain depository like ITU or GGE of the United Nations? If they are not fitting, then we might think about some other good place where we can discuss it and implement it with universal participation of the world. Because for the time being, this conference has limited number of participants. In doing so, I think we can think about what has happened with Nuclear Security Summit, which happened several years ago and lasted for the 5 next years. Well, the Nuclear Security Summit invited a number of like-minded countries, and we talked about how we can enhance the security of nuclear reactors. And then we eventually recommended all the things to be handled, to be implemented, monitored at the IAEA. By making it universal, we completed the function of the conference. So we might think about the ending of this conference. We highly appreciate the idea of the United Kingdom for initiating this conference, but maybe we might also think about the end point of this conference. Well, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, let me talk about a real case of a cyber problem. No, not a problem, fantastic cyber thing. That is the upcoming Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, February next year. I don't mean that I'm here to sell tickets to you, but I want you to visit the website of Pyeongchang Olympic Games, be familiarized with how we run it. And this is the combination or convergence of real world and the cyber world. In preparing the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, we have set up a nice cyber world. And we make sure that it is not sabotaged by or spoiled by others. To do that, we know the importance of security of the cyber world. Well, your participation in this upcoming Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Game is crucially important. So you are most welcome if you come to Korea in next February, but if not, at least you can visit the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your invitation to look at the website, the cyber world of the next Winter Olympics. I now request Ambassador Frank Grutter, who is leading the delegation of Switzerland to the GCCS, to speak to us. He has been a member of the UNGGE in 2016, 2017, and he will speak on cybersecurity aspects of the global cyber order, including the normative framework. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, so first of all I would like to thank the Indian government for having organized this wonderful conference and for having invited me to speak on this panel. The topic is a new global cyber order. I have to say at the outset that I think there will not be one new global cyber order. It will be as the internet is very decentralized, doesn't have a strong core, and as the internet and cyberspace permeates every aspect of our lives, I believe the new global order will be a patchwork of regulations, best practices, code of conducts. So many things that will make up the new global order. As I am the Security Policy Director in Switzerland in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I will focus on cyber security. And I believe cyber security would have to be made up of 3 building blocks. First, we need a normative framework. Second, we need confidence building measures. And third, we need capacity building. And when I look at the normative framework, for us, from the Swiss perspective, it's clear that international law applies to cyberspace. This is the finding that already the governmental group of experts on cyber and security, the UN expert group, has come up with in 2013, and it was reaffirmed in 2015. But we have to ask ourselves, what does it really mean when we say existing international law applies? For us, it is clear one element is the UN Charter in its entirety. And when you look at the UN Charter, you can say, well, there are certain principles that apply in cyberspace as they do in the real world. And the first one would be states have to refrain from the threat or use of force. States are not allowed to interfere in the domestic affairs of other states. Or third, they have the obligation to resolve their disputes in a peaceful manner. And if things turn very nasty and worse, it's also Article 51 that could be applied in cyberspace. Then if we go to other sources of international law, I would say it's international customary law and the principle of state responsibility that would come into play. And there, of course, every state that which observes that there's an internationally wrongful act coming out of its territory has the obligation to do everything and in its hands to stop such an internationally wrongful act also in cyberspace. And if a victim state then observes that and is announcing this to this state and the state doesn't do anything, then the victim state can take certain countermeasures. That would be the whole concept around state responsibility would, in our point of view, also be applicable to cyberspace. And then if we move on, we have international human rights, which are as relevant online as they are offline. We have, if we have a situation of armed conflict, international humanitarian law that is applicable with principles such as precaution, distinction, proportionality, humanity. So there again, we can take existing international law and see how it applies in cyberspace. On top of that, I mentioned the UNGGE. We have 11 norms of responsible state behavior that the UNGGE in 2015 produced. So these also set a framework, even though it's a voluntary one, but this is another framework that applies to states in cyberspace. So we have quite a comprehensive set already that is there, which we do not have to invent completely new, and that's where we should start our work and which needs further concretization and operationalization. The next building block is our confidence building measures. We all know that cyberspace offers a certain degree of anonymity, a certain degree, and it's difficult to do attribution, and this can create mistrust, misinterpretation, and there, I guess, states have an obligation almost to create more transparency how they are organized in relation to cybersecurity, what their doctrines are, for example, how they use cyber means, but also to create contact points, and to promote cooperation between states, which will finally lead to more stability in cyberspace. And if we talk about confidence-building measures, we also have to look at the OSCE, because probably that's the regional organization that is the most advanced on these things. They have adopted 16 confidence-building measures in 2014 and 16, and which are also inspiring now other discussions in other regional fora, such as the ASEAN Regional Forum and the Organization of American States. The third building block would be capacity building. We've heard from the minister from Korea that cybersecurity, we're as secure as the weakest link. So we all have an interest to invest in this weakest link and to make it much stronger. And that's where cyber capacity building comes in to strengthen the resilience of ourselves, but also of others who are not yet as advanced as those who are at the top of things. And capacity building means also that we help those states that wish to take part in the cyber policy discussions that are taking place in forums such as here, but at the UN and in other places, that they have the knowledge, they know the processes, the issues, the person so that they can really meaningfully take part in these discussions. And in that context, of course, we have the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, and if I come a bit closer to Switzerland, we have started an initiative in 2015, the Geneva Internet Platform, which has the mandate to bring people in Geneva together. We have about almost 40 international organizations, 180 diplomatic missions, 250 NGOs present in Geneva. So they try to break down those silos and put them on the table and having discussions on a lot of cyber-related issues, not only cybersecurity, but you have the WTO there, you have the World Economic Forum in Geneva. So there are many things that you can do with capacity building. On the way forward, we are a bit in a peculiar situation that at the moment that with the UNGGE having finished its mandate in summer 2017, that we do not have a UN forum to discuss cybersecurity issues. I believe from a Swiss perspective, we need the UN to play a role in such an important issue and giving the chance that, that states can meet and discuss this at the global level. For us, probably knowing with all the difficulties that exist around the UNGGE this summer, I think it would still be meaningful to have in the short term a forum which is an expert-driven forum, a consensus-based forum, but also which has, contrary to the UNGGE, a much more structured outreach to non-members and other stakeholders, and which has a rather limited mandate to allow to work really on issues. In the long run, we might need another really a permanent forum, but in the long run, as John Maynard Keynes said, we are all dead, so we rather should focus on the short run. And if I'm talking about the short run, I just would like to highlight one conference that's coming up. That's the Internet Governance Forum in Geneva from the 18th to the 21st of December, which is a truly multi-stakeholder conference, which is discussing everything related to cyber with an agenda that was established bottom-up and not top-down. So on behalf of the Swiss government, I would like to invite you to go to Geneva before Christmas and joining that conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your detailed views on the legal aspects of how to approach the way forward. I have now great pleasure in inviting our final speaker in the panel, Ambassador Zhou of the People's Republic of China. He is the coordinator for cyber affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China and a member of the UNGGE, which was meeting in June this year. He's a specialist in multilateral diplomacy, and Ambassador, all of us in this hall are eagerly looking forward to your perspective on the new global cyber order. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Mukerji. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, it's a great pleasure for me to join you at the GCCS 2017. First of all, I would like to join the previous speakers to thank the Indian government for the kind invitation and hospitality. And I look forward to in-depth discussions with all colleagues on the international efforts for the global governance and good order in cyberspace. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a digital era unseen before. The vibrant expansion of cyberspace has boosted market innovation, economic prosperity, and social development. Cyberspace is becoming a new frontier of people's work and life, a new engine for economic growth, a new platform for cultural prosperity, and a new bridge for communication and cooperation. But in the meantime, cyberspace has also brought us various new challenges. Infringements of individual privacy and intellectual property rights happen from time to time. Cyber attacks and cyber crimes have increased significantly. Cyber terrorism is becoming a global scourge. Critical information infrastructure are faced with potential vulnerabilities and risks. In the interconnected cyberspace, countries are bound together by intertwined interests. The global governance of cyberspace, which bears on the security of development of all countries, now stands as an important task for the international community. And in my opinion, international efforts should start with the following points. First, we should pursue the vision of building a community with shared future in cyberspace. The principle of co-sharing and co-governance should be followed in engaging in global governance. While safeguarding the purposes and the principles of the UN Charter and the fundamental rules governing international relations, we need to foster new thinking based on common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, and be committed to dialogue and cooperation. Amidst the frequent occurrence of incidents in cyberspace, resulting to use of force, deterrence, pressure, and sanctions, will probably not guarantee one country's own security and development. Rather, it may lead to strategic miscalculation, escalation of situation, and diminished mutual trust, which is inconducive to security, stability, and prosperity in cyberspace. Secondly, we need to attach equal importance to both development and security. We should facilitate security through development, strive to narrow the digital divide, and scale up capacity building assistance to developing countries to address development imbalances and overcome the weakness in global cybersecurity. In the meantime, we should underpin development with security. The booming digital economy has become a new engine for the innovative growth of global economy. We need to carefully nurture the sound and strong development of digital economy, which will neither sacrifice the vitality of development for the sake of absolute security, nor should we sidestep necessary security supervision. Only in this way can we deliver development benefits and security guarantees to all. Thirdly, we should promote just, equitable, and reasonable international rules and norms in cyberspace, as previously stated by the Swiss ambassador. Cyberspace is a new domain where there will be no governance without rules. The basis for sound global cyber order is a set of universally accepted international norms and rules, which is also the key to ensuring peace and security in cyberspace. The United Nations, as the most representative and authoritative international intergovernmental organization, should play a leading role in this respect. Although the 2016-2017 GGE on developments in the field of information and telecommunications concluded its work without a consensus report, It cannot be used as an excuse for deviation from multilateralism. Instead, it rather highlights the urgency and the necessity to deepen relevant international discussions and continue to build up consensus in the UN framework. In the long run, we should establish a more open and a more inclusive process within the framework of the UN and advocate broad participation in developing rules for cyberspace. And finally, we should enhance full-dimensional and multi-layered dialogues and cooperation. Cyberspace is shared by all countries. Multilateralism must be upheld in establishing global order, global cyber order, and all countries should have equal participation in decision-making. In the meantime, given the unique feature of the Internet, all stakeholders, including governments, international organizations, businesses, technical communities, and non-governmental institutions, should play their respective roles in cyber governance, with a view to promoting a better and safer cyberspace, shared and governed by all. Ladies and gentlemen, the Internet has been deeply integrated into China's economic and social development and the life of the Chinese people. Today, China is already home to 750 million Internet users, with the Internet penetration rate of 54.3%. In 2016, China's digital economy volume recorded at 22.4 trillion, amounting to 30.1% of our GDP. The trade volume of e-commerce reached 26 trillion RMB. Guided by the concept of innovative, coordinated, green, open, and sharing development, China is vigorously developing and implementing its national cyber development strategy, the Internet Plus Action Plan, building a digital China, and promoting a shared economy. The development of Internet in China not only benefits China, but also contributes to cyber security and development across the world. Last month, the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, which was a focus of international attention, concluded successfully. This epoch-making conference has established Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era as guiding ideology that the party must uphold in the long run. And the conference outlined the major policies for China's future development. As stated by President Xi Jinping in the conference, China aimed to foster a new type of international relations and build a community of shared future for mankind. It summarizes the goal of China's diplomacy for the new era and demonstrates the direction in which China will strive with all countries. Under the guidance of Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era, China will continue to uphold its fundamental foreign policy goal of preserving international peace and security and promoting common development, and work with all countries, all parties to establish a multilateral, democratic, and transparent global cyber order, and foster a peaceful, secure, open, cooperative, and orderly cyberspace, and build a community with shared future in cyberspace. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that very comprehensive statement on China's view on the new global cyber order. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have really been fortunate to have listened to so many different perspectives and well-informed perspectives today on the topic of a global cyber order. We began with the ambitious and effective use of cyber technology for development, including for bridging the gender divide. We moved on to how technology can be used, cyber technology can be used for implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. We heard about the appointment of a technology ambassador focused on introducing the technological dimension into new diplomacy. We heard about how the GCCS process should conclude with a harvest of some of the issues that have been discussed over the last few years in the GCCS. And we heard about the application of provisions of international law, especially in the UN Charter, on cyber issues. And lastly, we have heard a very, very well articulated view on the need for a cooperative international order based on transparency and equitable participation. I think that this is an important message that has come out of this panel. And here in India, just 2 days before we mark the 9th anniversary of the first time cyber technology was used to commit an act of terrorism in Mumbai, I think that this is a very, very important discussion that has taken place while keeping in mind, as our Prime Minister said yesterday, the dark uses that can be made out of this very, very potent technology. So with these words, I would like to thank you for having come here. The organizers inform me that we are well over the time limit given for this panel. The others who have to use this venue are waiting. So on your behalf, I would ask you to give a round of applause to all the distinguished ministers and ambassadors who have participated here today. Thank you.